Hey friend, please subscribe. 1 second for you. Big deal for me. I don't remember the exact moment it all changed. It wasn't a single conversation or one big blow-up. No, it was the tiny things, the little comments, the glances, the moments that seemed insignificant at the time but stacked up like bricks, building a wall between us. What I remember clearly, though, is the way she looked at me that night. It wasn't love. It wasn't even affection. It was something cold, something calculated, almost like she was sizing me up. You see, for years, I had lived under this idea that we were partners in everything. My wife, Carla, and we'd built something together. At least, that's what I thought. I wasn't some naive romantic, at least I didn't think I was, but I believed in the power of working hard and growing together. I thought I was doing it all for us. I thought my achievements were our achievements. But the more I look back, the more I realize how foolish I was to believe that. It all started with a small comment at a dinner party. The kind of thing you laugh off in the moment. We were sitting around the table with friends and family, talking about life. I had just been promoted to senior partner at the law firm where I'd worked for over 10 years. It wasn't just a big deal for me. It was a big deal for us. We had worked so hard to get here, sacrificing weekends, missing vacations, giving up personal time, and now, finally, I was being recognized for it. I tried to downplay it. I didn't want to come off as boastful, but I wanted Carla to be proud of me. So, I said casually, "Yeah, they made the announcement today. I'm a senior partner now." Her reaction wasn't what I expected. "Oh, that's nice," she said, her voice flat. "I guess you'll just work even longer hours now, huh? More time at the office, less time with me." It wasn't a joke. It wasn't playful. It was cold. And as she said it, she turned to our friends, shrugged, and added, "He'll be working 60 hours a week, and I'll still be here doing everything. That's just how it goes, right?" The laughter that followed stung. It wasn't the kind of laughter you share when everyone's having a good time. It was uncomfortable. I could feel my friends glance at me, awkwardly trying to pretend they hadn't heard the jab. But I heard it. It was a slap in the face. And what made it worse wasn't the comment itself. No, what hurt the most was that it was public. She didn't just dismiss my achievement in private. She did it in front of everyone. She mocked me in front of people who I had respected, who I had worked with. In that moment, I realized how little she thought of me, how little she cared about my success. I had thought we were on the same team, but it was becoming clear that I was playing alone. I had spent so much time building my career, thinking she would be beside me, supporting me. But it felt like she saw me as nothing more than a workhorse, a tool to fund her lifestyle. That night, when we got home, I didn't say much. I was too stunned. But she knew something was off. Carla always knew when something was wrong. But instead of apologizing, instead of acknowledging how her words had cut deep, she shrugged it off. "Oh, come on, it was just a joke. Don't be so sensitive." She always said that. Don't be so sensitive. As if my feelings were just some trivial thing that could be dismissed with a flick of the wrist. But it wasn't just that night. It was the months that followed. The slow, insidious undermining of everything I had worked for. At dinners with friends, she'd make similar comments, always turning my achievements into a punchline. "Oh, another promotion, Anders? That's so cute. I guess you'll be too busy to talk to me again, huh?" I started to realize it wasn't just about the work. It wasn't about me not being home enough. It was about something deeper, something that gnawed at me every day. Carla no longer saw me as a partner. She saw me as an obstacle to her comfort, a tool to keep her in the life she had grown accustomed to. One night, after one of her usual jabs about me not being home enough, I snapped. I'd had enough. "Do you even care about what I've achieved? About how hard I've worked to get here?" She looked at me, her face blank. "Why should I? You're always gone. You're not here. You don't listen, and all you ever do is talk about your stupid job. It's like you don't even see me anymore." And that was it. That was the moment I understood. For years, I had been killing myself to build a future for us. But in Carla's eyes, I was just a man who worked too much, a man who couldn't get it right, no matter how hard I tried. She didn't see the sacrifices, the late nights, the missed birthdays, the weekends spent buried in work. All she saw was the man who wasn't there when she needed him. I thought I was building something for both of us, but I was wrong. It was just for her. And somewhere along the way, I had lost myself in the process. So, I made a decision that night. A decision that would change everything. My next achievement wouldn't be another promotion. It wouldn't be more money, more recognition, or more time spent at work. My next achievement would be leaving her. The realization hit me like a freight train, but I didn't act on it right away. In fact, for a while, I tried to convince myself that maybe it was just a phase. Maybe Carla was going through something. Maybe she didn't realize how much her words were affecting me. But I was lying to myself. Deep down, I knew. I knew that the woman I had married wasn't the woman I was living with anymore. Something had shifted, and it wasn't just her. It was me, too. The way I had become numb to her behavior. The way I kept hoping she'd see me as more than just a paycheck. The way I had allowed her to mock my efforts without doing anything about it. I started to pull away from her, not consciously, but gradually. I stopped sharing my victories with her, stopped telling her about the projects I was working on, the deals I was closing. Why bother? She didn't care. I had realized that in the worst way possible, when I had poured my heart into something and her response was nothing but a cold, dismissive remark. One night, I came home late from work, exhausted but excited because I had just landed a huge client, a client that could take my career to the next level. I couldn't wait to tell Carla. But when I walked through the door, she barely looked up from her phone. "Oh, you're home," she said, not even trying to hide the irritation in her voice. "I thought you were going to be late again. Great job, I guess." Her words stung more than I wanted to admit. I tried to tell myself it was just exhaustion talking. But that night, I made a decision I had been avoiding for months. I wasn't going to let her take away my sense of accomplishment anymore. I wasn't going to let her diminish everything I had worked for. The next day, I didn't talk to Carla. I went about my day like I always did, but something had shifted in me. I realized how much of my self-worth had been tied up in her approval, how much I had allowed her to dictate my feelings. And for the first time in years, I felt free. That's when I began to think about my next achievement. Not the kind of achievement I had been chasing my entire life, but something different. Something that would finally give me the respect I deserved. I started noticing the cracks in our relationship more and more. They were subtle, but they were there, like a fracture spreading beneath the surface, invisible to the naked eye, but always there, ready to break wide open at any moment. Every day I spent with Carla felt like walking on thin ice. I was constantly trying to keep my balance, but she never seemed to notice. Or worse, she didn't care. The comments kept coming. The little digs. The dismissive remarks. The sarcastic jokes at my expense. I had once tried to shrug it off, but now it was like a constant soundtrack playing in the background of my life. One evening, after I'd spent hours preparing a presentation for a potential investor, I felt a strange sense of pride. I knew this was going to be a big moment for me, a step forward, a chance to prove myself in ways I hadn't before. I sat at the dinner table, nervously watching Carla as she ate, hoping for some kind of acknowledgement, some sign that she cared. But instead, she took one look at me and said, "You know, it's cute how you think everything you do is so important. But all this work isn't going to make you happy, Anders. You're just going to end up like every other guy who works himself into the ground and forgets what's really important." I was stunned. I didn't know how to respond. Here I was, pouring everything I had into this opportunity, thinking she might be proud of me. Instead, I was met with cold indifference, the same tired lines she always used to make me feel small. I wanted to scream. I wanted to lash out, to tell her how hurt I was, how tired I was of constantly being made to feel like my accomplishments meant nothing. But I couldn't. I had trained myself to be patient, to endure, to work harder. That's what I had done my entire life. And yet, with every passing day, I felt like I was slowly losing myself in the process. The tension between us grew. I started coming home later, avoiding the inevitable conversations that seemed to end in frustration. I was spending more time at work, diving deeper into projects, burying myself in tasks that didn't require me to confront the reality of my marriage. But deep down, I knew I was just avoiding the inevitable. One night, I came home to find Carla sitting on the couch, her face buried in her phone. I could tell something was off, but I didn't want to ask. Instead, I sat down next to her, trying to make small talk, hoping for a glimpse of the woman I had once fallen in love with. But she didn't respond. She didn't even look at me. After a long silence, she finally said, "I'm tired of this. I'm tired of pretending everything's fine when you're never really here. All you care about is your job and your stupid career. What about me, Anders? What about us?" That was it. The moment I knew everything had changed. It wasn't just about my job anymore. It wasn't even about the achievements I had worked so hard to build. It was about her not seeing me, about her not caring about the sacrifices I had made to give her everything she wanted. I was there, physically, but emotionally, I was already checked out. That night, I made a decision that would alter everything. I wasn't going to stay in this marriage out of some misguided sense of obligation. I wasn't going to let Carla's apathy be the thing that defined me. I had worked so hard to get to where I was, to prove myself not only to her, but to the world. And now, I realized I needed to prove something to myself. I needed to leave. I needed to stop chasing her approval and start chasing my own happiness. The following days felt like I was walking through fog. Everything seemed muted, distant, as though the life I had been living for years was slowly slipping through my fingers. I couldn't shake the feeling that the woman I had once shared everything with was now a stranger to me. I'd wake up beside her, going through the motions, but the spark was gone. The intimacy, the connection we once had eroded, and all that was left was this fragile shell of what we used to be. I couldn't bring myself to talk to her about it. How could I? What would I even say? Every time I tried to open up, she dismissed it. Every time I tried to explain how I was feeling, she either turned the conversation into an argument or shut down completely. We were trapped in this cycle of passive aggression and avoidance, and it was suffocating. One night, I came home earlier than usual. The house was quiet, too quiet, and I could hear the faint sound of Carla's voice coming from the living room. She was on the phone, laughing softly. At first, I didn't think much of it. But then, as I walked closer, I realized she wasn't just laughing. She was talking to someone, and her tone was different than I had heard in a long time. Playful, almost flirtatious. I stood frozen in the hallway, listening for a moment longer, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. "Oh, stop it," Carla said with a laugh. "You know how I feel about that. Anders never notices. He's too wrapped up in his job. He's always working, always focused on his stupid career." I could feel the blood rush to my face, my chest tightening with something between anger and disbelief. She was talking about me, mocking me, yet again, this time to someone else. The person on the other end of the line didn't matter. What mattered was the betrayal. I had always known she resented my work, but hearing it like this, it felt like a punch to the gut. It was one thing for her to make jabs in front of friends or at the dinner table. It was another to be so openly dismissive of me, my career, and everything I had worked for. I wanted to confront her right then, to call her out on her words, to demand an explanation. But I didn't. Instead, I quietly turned and walked out of the house. I needed space. I needed to think. That night, I drove around the city, not knowing exactly where I was going. I ended up at a bar, sitting alone, nursing a drink I didn't want, while I processed everything that had just happened. The silence between us had become unbearable, but it was something else. This was betrayal. She was mocking me, my achievements, everything I had sacrificed for her, and I had let it go on for too long. I remember sitting there, staring at my glass, and realizing that it wasn't just the small things anymore. It wasn't just her teasing or dismissing my career. This was deeper. She had checked out of the relationship long before I did. And now, the more I thought about it, the more I realized she had already given up on us. I wasn't the person she had once loved, and she wasn't the woman I had once trusted. She was someone else now, someone I didn't recognize, someone who made me feel invisible. All the years of working late, the promotions, the sacrifices had been for nothing. She didn't care about any of it. And if she couldn't appreciate the effort I had put in, then what was the point of staying? By the time I drove home, I knew what I had to do. I wasn't going to beg for her love, her approval, or her respect. I wasn't going to let her continue tearing me down. It wasn't just about my job anymore. It was about reclaiming myself, about finding the man I used to be before I became her shadow. I walked through the front door, my mind made up. Carla was still on the phone when I came in, and she barely acknowledged my presence. I didn't care. I wasn't going to waste any more time on her. "Carla," I said, my voice steady but firm. She looked up, startled, clearly not expecting me to speak. "I'm done," I told her, the weight of my words sinking in. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice suddenly cold, defensive. "I'm done with this," I repeated, feeling something inside me shift. "I'm done pretending that everything is fine when it's not. I'm done with you mocking me, belittling everything I've worked for. I've tried for so long to make this work, but I'm not doing it anymore." Her face went pale, and for a moment, I almost thought she might say something. Apologize, explain herself, anything to stop me from walking away. But she didn't. She just sat there, staring at me with a mixture of disbelief and irritation. "Well, if that's what you want, then fine," she said, her tone bitter. "But don't expect me to beg you to stay." And just like that, it was over. The wall that had been building between us for years finally came crashing down, and I walked away. It wasn't easy. It wasn't simple. But in that moment, I knew that the only way forward was without her. My next achievement wasn't going to be measured by the titles I had earned, the money I made, or the deals I closed. It was going to be something more important. It was going to be about me. The next few days felt like a blur. The house was quiet in a way I hadn't heard in years, as if the very walls were mourning the end of something that had been falling apart for a long time. Carla didn't speak much, and neither did I. There was nothing left to say. She seemed more annoyed than anything, as if I was the one who had caused this mess, but I knew better. I spent most of my time away from the house, trying to figure out what came next. I didn't have a clear plan, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going back. There was no turning back to a life where I kept making excuses for her behavior. No going back to pretending like I didn't see the way she had slowly chipped away at my confidence and my happiness. It wasn't just the mocking or the dismissive remarks anymore. It was the complete lack of respect. For so long, I had believed that if I just worked harder, if I just proved my worth, she'd come around. But I had been wrong. She wasn't going to change, and neither was I. One afternoon, I found myself sitting in a cafe, staring at a cup of coffee, my mind racing. It was almost surreal to think about how much time I had wasted trying to get her to see me, to appreciate what I had done for us. I had worked myself to the bone to make sure we had everything she said she wanted, but none of it mattered to her. The truth was, I had been trying to fill a void that was never going to be filled by anything I did. I felt a strange sense of freedom in that moment. For the first time in years, I wasn't tied down by her expectations, by the constant pressure to be more than I was. I wasn't being mocked anymore. I wasn't invisible. I was free to figure out who I was outside of the man I had become for her. It wasn't long before Carla reached out. I hadn't expected her to, but a few days after I left, she called. It was the first time she'd tried to contact me since that night. "Where are you?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Why are you doing this? We've been together for so long. Don't throw everything away." I wanted to hang up, to not give her the satisfaction of hearing me struggle with the decision I had made. But I didn't. I let the silence hang between us for a moment before I spoke. "You're right, Carla," I said, my voice calm, but resolute. "We've been together a long time. But I can't keep pretending anymore. I've spent years trying to make this work, trying to be someone I'm not just to get your approval. And I'm done." The line went quiet for what felt like an eternity. I could hear her breathing on the other end, her frustration palpable. "I don't understand," she finally said. "Why are you doing this? Why can't we just fix this? You think you're better than me now?" "No," I said quietly. "I don't think I'm better than you. I think I've just finally realized that I deserve better than this. Better than what we've become." I could hear her sniffle, but I didn't feel sorry for her. The hurt I had felt for years was finally starting to dissipate, and I was beginning to see just how much I had lost of myself in this relationship. "I think it's time for both of us to move on," I said, finally feeling the weight of my words sink in. Before she could respond, I ended the call. It was over. I didn't need to hear anything more from her. I had given everything I had, and now, it was time for me to rebuild. The silence after I hung up was deafening. It felt as though the weight of all those years of resentment and unspoken words had finally been lifted, and I was left with nothing but the hum of my own thoughts. But for the first time in ages, those thoughts didn't feel like a burden. They felt like a kind of liberation. I spent the next few days in a kind of detached calm. My phone buzzed constantly, messages from friends, family, and even colleagues. They all wanted to know what had happened, why I'd suddenly walked away from everything. The inquiries ranged from genuine concern to the typical curiosity you'd expect when something like this goes down. But I ignored them. I didn't owe anyone an explanation, especially not Carla. I had been so caught up in the noise of other people's opinions for so long, trying to please everyone around me, that I had forgotten what it meant to listen to myself. Now, with all the distractions gone, it was like I could finally breathe. For the first time in years, I didn't have to live up to someone else's expectations. I wasn't a successful man or her husband anymore. I was just me. I spent hours walking through the city, letting the cool air rush past me, feeling the ground beneath my feet. It was like stepping out of a fog that had clouded my judgment for so long. I had spent too many years wrapped in the toxic idea that I had to keep giving, keep striving for more. More recognition, more validation, more success, for someone who had never truly appreciated it. I couldn't help but think about how I had gotten here, how I had allowed myself to lose track of who I was, to lose track of what really mattered. I had focused so much on climbing the ladder, trying to impress people who would never be satisfied, that I had forgotten to ask myself the one question that should have been asked years ago. Was I happy? The answer, of course, was no. I thought back to the countless nights I'd stayed late at the office, working on projects that would add another line to my resume, another win to my portfolio. But in the process, I had ignored the most important thing, my own sense of fulfillment. It wasn't the promotions, the accolades, or the approval of others that mattered. It was something far simpler. It was peace. It was the ability to wake up every morning and feel proud of who I was, not because of what I had accomplished for someone else, but because I was living for myself. As the days passed, I felt a shift in me. It was subtle, but unmistakable. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't holding on to grudges. I had released all of that. And with it, I realized something even more powerful. I was ready to move on. It wasn't just about leaving Carla. It was about leaving behind everything that had tied me to a life I never truly wanted. I was done pretending. I was done living in the shadow of someone else's expectations. For the first time in years, I felt like I was standing at the edge of something new, something I had never dared to imagine for myself. I wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was certain. I was no longer going to let anyone define me. I wasn't going to keep sacrificing myself for someone who couldn't see me for who I truly was. I was going to make my own path, whatever that might look like. And for the first time, that thought didn't scare me. It thrilled me. The weeks that followed were a strange kind of awakening. The chaos and noise that once consumed my life had quieted down, replaced by a haunting silence that was, in many ways, exactly what I needed. I wasn't running anymore, not from my responsibilities, not from the pressure to meet everyone else's expectations. For the first time, I was standing still, truly still, and I was finally able to process everything that had happened. I didn't rush into anything. I didn't feel the need to fill the void with distractions. There was a calmness that came with walking away, with making a choice that was mine and mine alone. But the more I reflected, the more I realized how much I had let myself be consumed by a toxic dynamic. How much of my energy had gone into trying to please someone who didn't even see me anymore. One afternoon, I ran into an old friend from work. She was someone I hadn't seen in years, a woman who had once been part of the chaos of my career, someone I'd shared late nights and stressful days with. I didn't expect it, but when we saw each other in the street, there was an immediate connection, like a moment from the past that suddenly felt relevant again. We grabbed coffee, and as we sat across from each other, I felt something shift. This wasn't a date. It wasn't even an attempt to reconnect in the traditional sense. It was just two people who had been through their own separate struggles, now meeting again on different terms. And as we talked, I realized something important. I had been so focused on Carla, on my work, on the life I had created for someone else, that I had completely neglected the friendships and connections that had once meant something to me. In those quiet moments with my old friend, I remembered who I was before the marriage, before the career, before the need to prove myself to anyone. I wasn't a collection of titles or accomplishments. I was someone with dreams, desires, and a sense of self-worth that had been buried for far too long. It wasn't about getting revenge. It wasn't about showing Carla I was better off without her. It was about rediscovering who I was and building a life that made me happy. For so long, I had been driven by this desire to win, to succeed in the eyes of others. But in the end, the only person whose approval truly mattered was mine. I didn't need Carla to validate my worth. I didn't need anyone to tell me that I was enough. I was enough already, simply by choosing to walk away from a life that had drained me. The more I spent time on my own, the more I realized how much I had underestimated myself. I had been living in a state of self-doubt, constantly questioning my decisions, constantly second-guessing whether I was doing the right thing. But now, I was beginning to see that I had been on the right path all along. I had made the decision to reclaim my life, and that was the first step in rebuilding everything. And then, one night, something unexpected happened. I was sitting in a small bar, alone, with a drink in my hand, watching the people around me. I wasn't looking for anything, no connections, no new relationships. But across the room, a woman caught my eye. She was laughing with her friends, her smile bright and genuine. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a spark of interest. It wasn't anything profound. It wasn't a dramatic moment or some instant, intense connection. It was just the recognition of a possibility, of a life that could be different, a life that could be filled with joy, not driven by the weight of someone else's expectations. I didn't approach her. I didn't make any bold moves. I just sat there, watching, thinking about how far I had come. The person I was now was someone who didn't need validation, didn't need to be in a relationship for the sake of it. The person I was becoming was someone who could stand on his own, who could appreciate the world around him without being constantly pulled down by the weight of the past. And for the first time, I felt hope. Hope that the future wasn't something to fear, but something to look forward to. It wasn't long after that night at the bar that things began to fall into place. I realized something important. All this time, I had been letting Carla define my happiness. I had let her hold the reins to my emotions, my confidence, and my self-worth. But now, with the space and time to reflect, I understood that I was the one in control all along. I wasn't just a passive participant in my own life anymore. I was the one making the choices, and I was choosing a new path, one that was all mine. I started to focus more on myself, something I hadn't done in years. I took up old hobbies, ones that I'd abandoned for the sake of my career or my marriage. I spent time with friends I hadn't seen in ages, reconnecting with the people who had been sidelined by the life I'd built for Carla and me. Slowly but surely, I was rebuilding the man I had lost along the way. But there was still a part of me that needed closure. It wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. The way Carla had treated me, the way she had mocked my achievements and belittled me in front of others, it wasn't something I could just let go. I had spent too many years bending over backwards for her, trying to make her happy at the expense of my own dignity. Now, it was time for her to see that actions have consequences. I didn't plot anything sinister, but I knew that she had to face the reality of what her actions had done to our marriage. I was done playing the part of this sensitive, workaholic husband who didn't deserve respect. The best way to get back at her was to show her just how wrong she was about me, just how far I could go without her holding me back. It was simple, really. A few months after I had moved out, I received an invitation to the annual corporate gala I had once attended with Carla. It was a prestigious event, the kind where everyone made connections, showed off their success, and talked about their latest accomplishments. Carla would be there, of course, surrounded by her friends and colleagues. And it would be the perfect opportunity for me to show up. Not for her, not for anyone else, but for myself. The night of the gala arrived. I didn't tell Carla I was going. I had no intention of letting her think I was still in her orbit. But as I walked through the doors of the venue, dressed in a tailored suit that fit like it was made for me, I felt a rush of empowerment. It wasn't just about looking good. It was about proving to myself that I didn't need her validation anymore. As the evening wore on, I found myself standing by the bar, casually chatting with some colleagues I hadn't seen in a while. I could feel Carla's eyes on me across the room. She didn't approach, but I could tell she was watching me, trying to figure out what had changed. And I could almost hear her thoughts. How is he here? How is he so confident? I smiled to myself. The old me would have felt anxious, would have tried to make excuses for not being the perfect husband, would have tried to explain away every moment he spent working late or missing events. But tonight, none of that mattered. I wasn't the man she used to mock anymore. I wasn't the man who was always apologizing. I was finally standing in my own power. The night ended, and I left the gala with my head held high. As I walked out into the cool night air, I received a message from Carla. It was brief, and the words stung, but I knew they were coming. I saw you tonight. You think you've won, but you haven't. You'll never be enough without me. I read her message, and for a second, the old feelings of doubt crept in. But then I realized something profound. She's still trapped in the past, still holding on to the idea that she could control me, still trying to make me feel small. But I'm not that man anymore. I put my phone away and stepped into the night, feeling freer than I ever had before. The journey I had been on wasn't just about leaving Carla. It was about reclaiming my life and my happiness, about understanding that I didn't need anyone to define me. I wasn't looking for revenge or to prove anything to her anymore. I was simply living my truth, and that, in itself, was victory. As for Carla, I knew her life would continue. She would find new ways to manipulate, to belittle, to try to control the people around her. But she would never again have the power to affect me. My next achievement? It wasn't in the boardroom. It wasn't about any title or accolade. My next achievement was in finding peace, in letting go of the past, and in realizing that I was enough, just as I was. And that was all I ever needed. Please like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. I read them all.